What is going on, Sports Wars? We're here and we are live for Wednesday night against the spread. And as always, I'm joined by Robert Barnes from sportspicks.locals.com. Robert, how you doing?
It was a great week at Sports Picks, where we help put the odds in your favor. If you remember last week, you could have been one of those that picked a teaser combo on college football. He took a $250 bet and made more than $40,000 on just one weekend of Sports Picks recommended picks. So congratulations to him and everybody else who had a nice, fat, profitable week this past week.
Wow, that is a big one right there. So I'm assuming he didn't bet on Miami. That's my guess.
But hey, your Bears looked okay.
Hey, Justin Fields put together two pretty good halves of football so far for Justin Fields. That's one whole game, if you're counting, and they have won one game. Unfortunately, listen, they can win one. I don't know if I wanted to win another one. I kind of like all the mock drafts with the Chicago Bears having the number 1 and number 2 overall picks in the draft. I'm okay with that. So I like the idea of getting Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't mind those mock drafts because they do have that Carolina pick. But yeah, the Bears actually won after giving up a big lead to the Broncos the week before. We'll see what this week holds. Some interesting results in football this week for sure. One thing, because we're going to look forward at some point to the NFL games this week. Can we get the Giants out of prime time? Like, how many primetime games have the Giants already had this season for one of the worst teams in the league? It's miserable. I can't stand it. I hate it. And they've got another Sunday night football game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they thought the magic of last season would carry over this year. Doesn't quite look like it. It's been mostly ugly aside from that late comeback against Arizona. And then you got, San Francisco continues to roll. The Bill Belichick on the worst back-to-back games of his entire coaching career. Mac Jones may already be out in New England. And can he bounce back in the post-Tom Brady era, or will there always be an asterisk by Bill Belichick? Same with the Raiders head coach, who managed to win despite trying to blow it about 4 different times against the lowly Jordan Love-led Packers, who are missing Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers was challenging Travis Mr. Pfizer Kelce to a debate since he's going to go promote the COVID vaccine, apparently.
Listen, I can't imagine. It's funny seeing that go out there, but I don't know what the odds are on that actually being broadcast on ESPN, on the Pat McAfee show. Aaron Rodgers and RFK against Travis Kelce and Fauci. That's the proposed teams from Aaron Rodgers.
Isn't that kind of like, they'd be like the San Francisco 49ers and Kennedy and Rodgers playing the Florida International University team. I mean, that with Kelce and Fauci, that would be as big a mismatch as any that we've ever seen.
I don't think Pfizer would let Fauci or would let Travis Kelce do something like that. I can't imagine, but it has been interesting watching the back and forth between those guys, and it definitely seems to be all in good fun as well.
Oh yeah,
and to be fair, even though I don't agree with what Kelce's promoting, I think he handled it pretty well. The response, all you can do is laugh at it and own it and just throw a light jab back at the Johnson & Johnson family. He handled it perfect.
And I think it was, I think it's apropos that if you're Pfizer, you pick Travis Kelce to be your face, to be your front, because it's not like anybody confuses Kelce with being the high IQ wing of the NFL.
Well, and also some people are pretending like this just came out of the blue and maybe it's to do with Taylor Swift. Travis Kelce partnered with Walgreens in 2021 to promote the COVID vaccine. This isn't something new. This goes back 2 years.
The dude is dating Taylor Swift. I mean, he's really good at catching footballs, but he makes Gronk look like an MIT graduate.
Yeah. But hey, his life seems pretty good right now, especially as they continue to get a lot of beneficial calls from the referees. I don't know if you've seen all this, Robert. Obviously, when you are the defending Super Bowl champs, when you've already won a Super Bowl within the past couple of years on top of that, when you have Patrick Mahomes, when you got Kelce, when you got all these guys, people are always going to look for reasons to not like you or dislike you. You had the Taylor Swift factor on top of that. every single close call or missed call or whatever is going to get called into question. Do you think the Chiefs are getting, I would guess, more than the usual benefit of the doubt for some of these calls? Do you think it's kind of just NFL standard?
Well, it's fascinating because over with the modern televised era of so many games being available for replay and everything else, we've seen officiating bias mostly shrink in most American leagues, including especially the NFL. Like home field advantage used to be mostly about officials ruling
They
in
didn't want to
favor
get
of the,
booed. They're going with the fans.
and that used to be 3.5 points. It's now down to 1.5 points. I mean, at some places it's neutral. So I think out now in the NBA, by contrast, you still have some celebrity favoritism. LeBron James, famous flopping, and so on and so forth. But in the NFL, we've mostly seen referee bias dramatically decline. But I do think with certain teams, certain brands, we're still seeing it present in places like with Patrick Mahomes, with the Chiefs Super Bowl winning and dominant. I mean, they've been dominant. I mean, over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, won 2 Super Bowls, lost another one. So I mean, barely missed 2 more. So they deserve the kind of respect that they're getting, but they are clearly getting a little too much from the refs.
Yeah, like Tom Brady's always going to get maybe a little bit quicker flag for something like roughing the passer than say, I don't know, if Nathan Peterman happens to make a start. Like these are things that have happened throughout the course of sports history, whether it's Michael Jordan or Kobe or whatever. You kind of get that. There have obviously, in the era that we're at, when you've got 30 different camera angles that people can always find, there's going to be a lot of missed calls. Everything seems to be highlighted like drastically right now with the Chiefs. I think in large part just because they've been at the top for a couple of years now, 5 AFC championship games, whatever. They are now turning into what the Patriots used to be. You're going to have more people that are rooting against the Chiefs. That's kind of how I see it. Not to say there haven't been some bad calls. There have. I just tend to think it has a little bit more to do with more people hating the team than it has to do with the NFL necessarily out, like specifically, oh, this is the playbook, guys. We got to do this here.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Speaking of somebody who's not very liked, we are going to talk a little bit about the Browns game later on because it's going to depend on who makes the start. But the Deshaun Watson situation has continued to get very interesting when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. And I'm not talking about who he chooses to have as a massage therapist. I'm talking about this injury that apparently continues to plague Deshaun Watson. Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson still not practicing with shoulder injury. PJ Walker promoted to backup. Well, based on how the start went the other day, on late notice, I'm not surprised they went and got PJ Walker and they're going to have him start if Deshaun Watson can't go. But this is now something that's played out for a couple weeks where Deshaun Watson was cleared to play last Sunday, not last Sunday, last Sunday, 2 weeks ago. He was cleared to play by the medical staff, but he just felt like he couldn't go all the way back September 24th, whatever that day was. And now here we are 2 weeks later. Deshaun Watson's refusing to talk to anybody about it. He's not answering questions from anybody. The players are mad that he's not playing. The fans are obviously pissed off, especially when you've got a guy like David Njoku, who this is what his face looked like a day or two after he got burned, like severe burns to his face and arms. He goes out there and plays, even with some pain, some discomfort. But Deshaun Watson seems like he's not willing to put it all on the line, which is just, I think people are already starting to get fed up with this $50 million guaranteed per year for Deshaun Watson.
Well, that was always kind of a crazy contract, given the problems he had and given some uncertainty how he would do outside of that Texans offense. But, do we have any doubt that if he was playing the Broncos this week instead of the 49ers, he'd feel just fine and be practicing? And you have to wonder whether he doesn't want to get shown up by the one of the best defenses in the league for the last several seasons. Even though this, for a true competitor, this is a great game with the Cleveland Browns defense as talented, as good as it's been this year and as talented as it is. But it says something about who he is that he's trying to dodge. But the way he left Houston kind of showed that there was this was not a guy who's desperate to win. This was a guy who's eager to make money.
This has nothing to do. Personally, I don't really give too much of a shit about the massage stuff. I think all those women knew exactly what they were doing. We probably talked about this when it happened, right? Not the type of quality of leadership or integrity you want your quarterback, but whatever. Throw that aside. I judge him more for the fact that he sat out a season with the Houston Texans than I do all that other off the field stuff. Because yes, he forced his way out of there after signing a contract or after signing a big deal. He decided to force his way out of Houston because he was tired of whatever was going on. How long is it going to be before he does something like that in Cleveland? I don't know, but people are already fed up with him. They were patient while he was suspended. He comes back, doesn't look great. Well, now it's time to do something. It's time to start earning all that money. And a lot of people frustrated with Deshaun Watson, still apparently not ready to come back from that shoulder injury, despite being medically cleared for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Cleveland's not a place that's a place to go if you're a weak minded quarterback, as Deshaun Watson is showing himself to be so far.
Well, I think that Baker, say what you will about Baker. I think he's been very good for Tampa Bay. I expected him to play well in Tampa with those weapons and with that healthy defense. That defense was not able to help Tom Brady out a ton last year because they did have some big injuries. They're back healthy. They're playing really well. Baker's not turning the ball over. That's a decent team down there in Tampa Bay. But Baker as a player and as like a person, that type of mentality he has, I personally think fits Cleveland really well. That type of Midwest blue collar town that Cleveland is. I think Baker fits. I think they liked Baker. Having a guy who, he's not a top 5, top 10 quarterback, but he will die for you. That's what a city like Cleveland wants. That doesn't seem to be the guy Deshaun Watson is.
Nope.
But if we're going to talk about any, bad beats, I do not know. I don't remember what the line was for this Miami Georgia Tech game, but I think, Robert, inevitably the worst, maybe one of the worst losses we've ever seen by Mario Cristobal deciding not to kneel the ball down when you could have ended the game and, go ahead and call a running play for Miami. And that took what had been an incredible season for them, an undefeated season up to that point. And they end up losing in the final seconds to a Georgia Tech team. Cristobal had got a lot of praise this year for the way he's turned the team around, the decisions he made with those coordinators. But holy shit, he got a lot of heat, and rightly so for that call at the end of the game.
Yeah, we were on Georgia Tech, but that cover had cashed early. There was never in danger. They were huge underdogs. I think that's the second or third time under this coach they've won as 20-point underdogs or more, which is kind of crazy. But that'd be the wildest outcome of any game I've seen in a long time. And especially when you got a nitwit like Jesse, I think it was Jesse Palmer, the Mr. Bachelor or whatever was up there doing the, and even he was saying,
what are you doing here?
All you got to do is kneel now. You don't have to run a play, saying it before the play. It wasn't like even he's saying it. And Miami seemed to not be aware. Then they fumble the ball. And then with 20 seconds left, you managed to give up a touchdown to Georgia Tech?
Yeah.
That was embarrassing. I mean, right when you're on a steamroll, when you're overcoming last year's bad memories, when you're undefeated, you're going into a big game against Carolina, and you blow it to Georgia Tech as huge favorites at home in Miami. That was definitely will go down as one of the more embarrassing coaching mistakes in modern college football.
And the crazy thing is, people very quickly found a highlight of the same exact thing happening in Oregon in like 2018 or 2019, a couple years ago when he was there. Apparently, this is just something he doesn't like to do. He doesn't like to kneel. I don't know why. I would imagine you'd like to win, especially if that's happened to you before. But I mean, everybody knows when that play clock is at a certain point, that's all. You're done. We all, as fans, are doing that math in our heads when we're figuring out, okay, they need to get a stop here, how many timeouts they've got. That's something everybody does. And Mario Cristobal does not follow that rule, and he paid the price. And, I mean, who knows what could happen in the ACC this year? Miami was about to hit the heart of their schedule. They've got a big game coming up this week, and that could have been the difference. That might be their season right there. Which is pretty wild to believe. I see somebody, Ezra Miller's cellmate, says, shout out Fresh and Fit reacting to this channel. Yes. I heard somebody tag me that Fresh and Fit reacted to the Trevor Bauer video we've got here on Sports Wars. So, hey, shout out to them. Hopefully they said it was from Sports Wars. We picked up a couple followers from that. Yes, the Trevor Bauer situation, very interesting. That dude got screwed over, just like a lot of people have been falsely accused.
Yeah. There's
but-
a bit, the Dodgers could use him right now, given the way they're going to blow another, huge chance, big favorites to make the World Series, or at least the pennant. And now they may lose before they get out of even the divisional series, may not win a single game to the Arizona Diamondbacks, no less.
Baseball is, I think that baseball more so than maybe any other sport. Hockey's this way too. Hockey, you can get like a goalie that gets really hot at the right time and stuff like that. Baseball to me is all about momentum and how you're playing. And a lot of times, these teams that have had these big advantages or big leads in a division that have kind of been able to coast, they're just not all, operating, fully at the time. Whereas these teams that had to make sure they got in the wild card, had to, recover from this injury, do this. They come in hot, ready to play. They've been in postseason mode for a month at this point, all September, making sure that they make the playoffs. And all of a sudden, they get in and they roll. You're seeing, the Phillies right now absolutely taking it to the Braves. They won again big time today. Bryce Harper is one of the best clutch postseason athletes we've seen. And for a guy who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at like 15 years old, designated as the next big thing, he is, you can be critical of him or how he acts or his attitude or whatever, but sitting there, he's only like 30 years old at this point. This dude has had an incredible career already with 2 different franchises. And they look to continue that great postseason run this year.
Yeah, I think road teams have now won 2/3 of the postseason games so far this year, which is striking. I mean, baseball is a place where umpire at home advantages have really shrunk because you've got, everybody's got that little strike thing at home. You can see what the calls really are and aren't. And you got the replay now on close calls in the field. And you're seeing more and more evidence of it and what's showing up on so much so that some people are debating whether the structure is the right structure. Should there be 5-game divisional series? Should there be 3-game wild card series? That that the regular season seems mostly irrelevant, except just making into the playoffs. That it doesn't matter whether you're first, second, third, because those seedings are not holding up very well in the recent era.
Yeah, certainly, and obviously with the expansion of baseball postseason teams, in the last 5-6 years, whatever it was, that changed a lot of things. Back when there was only 8 teams making the playoffs, man, the regular season was very, very important. But that's a baseball topic. We're here for football. We may as well get into one of the teams we just talked about. Miami coming off a crushing, brutal loss that may have just screwed up their entire season. They are heading to North Carolina to take on the 12th ranked North Carolina Tar Heels, who are still undefeated.
Yeah, so Carolina favored by 4, total around 58, 57, depending on where you're going. It's going up. Basically, they're predicting a 31-27 win for North Carolina. They're not expecting Miami to really offense very much. And they're expecting, North Carolina's defense to be average, but not spectacular. And because of Miami's struggle, I think because of the Georgia Tech game is why this line is where it's at. Probably would be under 3, but for that finish and how much publicity it got. Especially given the public is hammering North Carolina, about over 80% of the tickets coming in on the Tar Heels. I think the line is probably about right. These teams are about equally talented, equally capable. And it really depends on how well Miami bounces back from that loss last week. If we see the Miami that showed up against A&M, then I would say Miami's very much a live dog in this game. If we see the Miami that played the way they did against Tech, then Carolina will roll.
Yeah, because even if they hadn't, right, even if they hadn't made that terrible mistake at the end, it still was an embarrassing performance from Miami compared to what people thought that Georgia Tech team was capable of. But, certainly North Carolina looking to stay undefeated.
I mean, Tech was coming off a loss to Bowling Green. Turned around and got crushed in the MAC. So that's why that game was the line that it was. But, the Canes historically, not always under Cristobal, but historically have always been dangerous as in this kind of situation. And you never know with Gene Chiswick's North Carolina defense, which defense you're going to get. It's been better this year, but not as reliable as some of the older North Carolina teams were.
Well, speaking of, big time head coaches coming off a loss, we got Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M heading to play Tennessee. Your Tennessee Volunteers, Robert. How do you see this game shaking out?
Tennessee's favored by 3, total at 55, which is a little bit low given, Tennessee's tendency to go over in the Josh Heupel era. Tennessee's, they took care of South Carolina pretty easily, but before that lost to Florida on the road. A&M, talent-wise, is really stacked, but they clearly have issues in the secondary because Miami exploited them badly in the secondary, and then Alabama went and did the same. I mean, Alabama had one of the most simple game plans they probably ever executed. It was just throw the ball deep one-on-one when we get our guys one-on-one, and it mostly worked most of the game. And, and Johnson is the backup QB for A&M. Looks like he's going to be there for the whole year because Connor Wegman, the starter, is out for the season. That probably takes a little bit of a toll. The Petrino offense has been working better, but their run game has not been reliable. Tennessee's whole thing is take away the big play, but that may not. That may work to Texas A&M's edge because they've been good at under Johnson at moving the ball steady down the field more so than big plays. And A&M definitely has the talent edge here. So 2/3 of the bets actually so far, tickets are coming in on A&M. I expected them to come in on Tennessee after that close game with Alabama. But a lot of people are respecting A&M's performance in that game. And probably some doubts about Joe Milton at Tennessee, which is deserved. It's just Milton looks a lot like Milroe, and Milroe did whatever he wanted throwing deep against A&M frequently. He made the Miami QB look like a Heisman candidate. So that's what Tennessee loves to do is one-on-one matchups and throw deep. And it's the one thing Milton does better than anything else he does. His problem is throwing short, throwing intermediate with consistency. So the line is probably about where it should be. I would say talent-wise, A&M has the edge. But schematically and matchup-wise, Tennessee has the edge.
Well, over in the Pac, well, I don't even know what it is anymore. Pac 4 at this point, Pac 2, however many teams are actually left there. We got a pretty big matchup. Oregon, other than one game against maybe like Texas Tech or something random earlier this season, nearly every game for them has been a big blowout, whether it's Colorado, whether it's Stanford. Is this going to be the game in the Pac-12 where they finally get challenged against Washington at Washington? This is a massive matchup.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 2 top 10 teams, 2 playoff contending teams, 2 last of the Pac-12 title contending teams. Washington favored by 3, so they're basically seen as even teams with just the home field edge to the Huskies. High total, not surprising given how explosive both of these offenses have been. Washington basically expected to win like 35, and Oregon 32, something like that. The people don't think the total is high enough. They think it should be in the 70s. Over 90% of the tickets coming in on the over. That's the biggest take in the game. It's relatively even on the spread, which is not a big surprise. The only thing is Bo Nix has been a different quarterback on the road than at home throughout his entire history dating back to Auburn. And Washington has just seemed unstoppable in its offensive explosiveness throughout the year. And Oregon hasn't shown much defense. So the game does look like an old school Pac-12 back and forth, high scoring affair. So I see why people are coming in on the over. The line is probably right. Talent-wise, these teams are about even. On paper, Oregon's defense should be more talented than Washington's, but it's not like they've, been overly impressive defensively. Now, they haven't really played anybody except Texas Tech offensively to really put a scare into them. But this is definitely the game of the week. Seattle will be rocking. I'd say Washington does have the slight edge due to their more consistent offensive performance and Bo Nix trouble on the road.
Yeah, and I think I'm most thankful for is, one, it's a great matchup, but it's also on at 3:30. Yeah. It's not on at 10 o'clock kickoff or whatever, which for me on the East Coast, especially if one of these games end up going, I don't know, in overtime, USC, like I don't have to worry about anything like that, staying up till 2 in the freaking morning. But yeah, it's going to be an incredible matchup. A matchup that might not quite have the offensive fireworks of Oregon Washington is one that's going a little bit under the radar this week, and that is Iowa and Wisconsin. I don't think you're going to see the same offensive output from these two teams, but still a big game for Big Ten implications.
Iowa's probably still playing with their backup quarterback. They're classic Iowa. They're, other than Eric Hall, the Michigan transfer, they really have no one to throw the ball to, and they don't have a quarterback who consistently throws it. They did get their running back last week, and he showed some flashes. Iowa's a team that really wants to run the ball. Wisconsin, despite all the talk of the UNC coordinator Phil Longo coming in and getting the transfer from SMU at quarterback, really that hasn't worked that well offensively. So neither of these teams has really impressed offensively. Both teams have been pretty good defensively. Iowa's been dominant defensively now for years. And outside the Penn State game, and even you look at the under the radar in the box score, that the Iowa's defense was pretty solid still in that Penn State game. So the total sits at 34, with Wisconsin favored by double digits, by 10 in most places. So historically, you bet a double-digit underdog with a low total, and you're going to cash a lot more tickets than you don't. It's right now evenly split on the tickets between these two teams. Everything about this game says 10-7, something like that. I would be shocked at a high-scoring game. 34 is one of the lowest totals in college football in the last 20 years, but these are two teams that deserve it.
Yeah, it's justified, and even that seems high. When you do look at the scope of the Big Ten, things are about to change drastically with the addition of, several of these former Pac-12 teams and stuff like that. But if we didn't have that changing, because that's obviously going to change things. Right now, it's Big Ten East, Big Ten West. Easily, the power dynamics are sitting there in the East with Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. All top 10 teams, all sitting there in the same division of the division. If we didn't have these big additions, you'd have to imagine people would be calling for some sort of realignment in the Big Ten. But it looks like we're not going to have to worry about that. But you can't imagine they would let that go on for too much longer.
No doubt. And I mean, imagine if all those teams that are joining the Big Ten were there this year, you'd have 7 of the top 10 in the Big Ten? Because you'd have Oregon, you'd have Washington, you'd have USC.
Yeah.
You have Michigan, you'd have Penn State, you have Ohio State. So at least 6 of the top 10 teams in the country would be in next year's Big Ten. So adding the teams they've added really make them a power conference with the ability to compete on par with the SEC, especially depending on what happens at Texas A&M and Florida, and with Nick Saban toward the latter part of his tenure at Alabama.
Yeah. Anyway, that just caught my eye as we were talking about that, because I'm thinking, Wisconsin, Iowa, it's probably whoever wins is probably going to end up winning the Big Ten West, which probably ain't going to mean too much based on what it's looking like in the Big Ten East. Obviously, a little bit of a down year for Wisconsin based on where they're traditionally at. And then our last college game of the week is one that I always look forward to: USC versus Notre Dame. Now, USC has struggled against a lot of their teams. Somehow they still happen to be 6-0. Notre Dame has really shown its signs of, oh, by the way, is a traditional Notre Dame team that's way too fucking overrated preseason and before they actually play anybody. Now they've come back to reality. Louisville put a beat down on them, but this is at Notre Dame, big historic rivalry. How's it look?
Yeah, it's I was surprised. I thought USC would be favored in the game. Notre Dame is favored by 3, total at 60. So they're basically thinking it's going to be something like 31-28, 32-29, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I was surprised they thought Notre Dame's defense would really hem in USC's offense that much. I could understand why they think Notre Dame might really offensively explode against USC, even though they didn't against Louisville. And Louisville, to start the year, was not considered a good defense at all. And they played better in the last couple of games, but they gave up 28 to Boston College. So, and that's not exactly a barn burner of an offense. So I was a little surprised that the money's leaning USC, but not too heavily, because I think for what you mentioned, USC, Colorado made it a little bit tight there towards the end. Arizona State was, very down. Arizona State program was in the fourth quarter, close in that game. They needed multiple overtimes to beat Arizona at home, playing a new quarterback. So that combination of games has stuck in people's heads, and they're not having confidence in USC. And I thought there'd be more of a bounce back against Notre Dame after that bad loss at Louisville, but there really hasn't. People are remembering Notre Dame playing Ohio State close, taking care of NC State on the road, but that's an NC State team. It's not the same caliber team. They're even looking at a new quarterback at NC State because the quarterback transfer didn't work out as expected. So, if I would lean any direction, it would be toward USC, just because Notre Dame hasn't shown the offensive consistent explosiveness to necessarily exploit USC's defense. And this USC offense really doesn't get stopped by hardly anybody. So they mostly stop themselves when they do. And again, Notre Dame defense has looked solid, but Ohio State's offense isn't the same offense. That's been clear as the season's progressed. They're getting a little bit better, but they weren't ready to play early on the road. And you look at in Louisville, kind of did a lot of what they wanted to do against. This was a Louisville with a new coach and a transfer from Cal. So it was like I thought Notre Dame's performance against Louisville was even worse than Miami's performance against Georgia Tech from a talent and expectations perspective.
Well, they were getting beat by 20 until they scored a touchdown in like the last minute of that game. The game ended up closer than it really was. Louisville beat the shit out of them.
Yeah, and Louisville's getting big plays, and it's not like that offense. You'd be as a Purdue guy, Louisville ran the ball well. When did he do that at Purdue?
With Brom, yeah, I know. Never when they had the guy to hand it off to for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. So but that told me, okay, Notre Dame wasn't defensively matching up well. And so I get it. It's Notre Dame at night. USC doesn't travel great. So it will be a heavy Notre Dame crowd. And it's a big game on national TV. I don't know if it means the same thing to Notre Dame as it did earlier in the year, because, if they had beat Louisville, they're still fighting for a playoff berth. Now they're out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
They aren't in a conference. So it's USC. It's always going to be a big game, but you got to wonder exactly where their mindset is. And what Louisville defensively did gave Sam Hartman some trouble, and that's Louisville's defense. So, USC has been good at creating turnovers. That's the one thing they've done well under Alex Grinch. So so I just look at this, and I would lean a little bit towards USC catching points.
Yeah, and I do think the entire narrative is interesting as well, with Oklahoma just having a big win over Texas. A lot of them looking to see what Lincoln Riley's doing over there, and included a big goal line stand from Oklahoma. I saw a lot of people saying, when's the last time you saw an Oklahoma defense do something like that? A little shot at Lincoln Riley.
Oh, yeah.
But let's head over to the NFL. We've got Ruin Leon in chat, who didn't like the fact that I guess I used a picture of Russell Wilson in the thumbnail. He thinks I'm picking on his Broncos. Listen, I don't need to pick on the Broncos. The Broncos pick on themselves. Sean Payton has done this to himself, talking all that shit before the season, throwing the former coach under the bus. The Jets got complete payback for everything that happened in the offseason with their new coordinator. I know they liked beating the Broncos last week, but the Broncos have a much tougher opponent than the Jets. They're playing the Kansas City Chiefs at the Chiefs. And this, of course, I don't know if Taylor Swift's going to be in attendance or not. Who knows? Maybe the Swifties will be there as well. But this is a pretty big spread.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The Broncos right now, offensively, they're back to being a good offense. Their problem has been they are putting up a defensive performance we haven't seen in 20 years, and it's not on the good side. And this comes from a Broncos team that has been good defensively for years. And now all of a sudden, it's not only the worst defense in the league, it's one of the worst defenses we've seen in a decade. They gave up almost 7 yards per play to Zach Wilson and the Jets at home. They let little baby Baker Mayfield for the Commanders come back against Denver and ruin one of my survivor picks after being up 18 points. It's bad. It's not just Miami setting a record scoring 70 against them. It's Justin Fields torching him. It's baby Baker at Washington torching him. It's Zach Wilson for the Jets torching him. And now they're going to go play Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead. That doesn't spell well. That's why the Kansas City's favored by 10 and 3/4 of the tickets are betting the Chiefs. Now, that is a big spread, given that Denver's capability of scoring. But mostly what's interesting is the total is at 47. It came down from open at 51. And I honestly, and the money is pouring in. The tickets are pouring in on the under. It's like, I don't know what I'm missing. Is nobody watched Denver's defense this year? How are they going to keep? I mean, right now they're predicting something like a 28. Well, let's see, 27-20 would be 47. So, but 28-18, something like that. And it's like Wilson's been okay moving the ball. That hasn't been the problem.
Russell Wilson has actually played okay this year.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big problem has been on defense. The Chiefs, to be fair, the Chiefs have not looked like, all engines are in sync there. They've gone, obviously, they played the Bears. They scored 40 points, blah, blah, blah. Other than that offense has looked rather pedestrian at times, and like they have struggled a little bit here and there. So maybe that's what people are seeing, but still 47 seems like a really low total for this game.
And it's been a weird NFL in that we're seeing some of the lowest total scores and average scores in a decade so far in the NFL, but that doesn't usually keep up. Usually that adjusts as the season progresses. So my free pick of the week is that this game will go over the total of 47. I think Denver will score at least 20, and I'll be shocked if Kansas City doesn't score 30. I mean, so far Denver's done nothing to show they can defend anybody. They can't defend air. If you can't defend Justin Fields, you can't defend Baby Baker, you can't defend Zach Wilson. How are you going to defend Patrick Mahomes? I just don't see it. I think the Chiefs are going to put a big number up. Now, I could see Broncos potentially maybe a first half cover or something like that. But I get where the 10.5 comes from. I just don't get where the 47 comes from, other than it's been an unusually low-scoring season so far in the NFL.
Oh, there you go. We did just want to give a shout-out. We got 20 new members from Dom H. Big shout-out, Dom H, for the 20 gifted memberships over on Sports Wars. And we have Jay Schwalbach as well. Jay Schwalbach for $50 over on Rumble. I'm done giving money to Jeremy. You two are my new whores. I can't believe he's doing a stream at the same time as you guys. He needs to show some respect. Hey, I am totally down with you there, Jay Schwalbach. I appreciate it. It does look like we're having a little bit of a problem over on Rumble right now. We've been streaming there just within the past minute or so. I got a notification that there might have trouble. So I don't know if it's on. I think it's on Rumble's side, if I had to guess. But I hope you heard this, Jay Schwalbach, and you're still over there. After giving $50 fucking, it's gonna be pretty sad if you can't hear it being read. But I guess we'll see. Hopefully that gets resolved there. But on to the next game for us, and that is a Ravens team who the Ravens very disappointing last week with the way that they performed. But the Ravens are heading to reverse their fortunes against the Tennessee Titans.
And this is an old kind of rivalry matchup from the old playoff days where they would wage war against one another. Playing over in London early. Mentioned that the Jags were live dogs last week. They not only covered, they won outright, beating the Buffalo Bills there in London, but they got to be there for an extra week, probably gave them a little extra boost. The Baltimore favored by 4 in the early start in London. Total sitting at 40-41. That part's not surprising because Ravens games have been real low scoring this year. Titans games have been real low scoring this year. These teams love to wage war on each other, and they're usually defensively brutal fights. So you can understand the total. Tickets coming in on the Ravens even at 4. Some sharp money coming in on Titans because of the history of this coaching staff with Tennessee covering and even often winning as an underdog of 3 or more. I would probably lean towards the Titans to cover that number, but they do need to get a better performance. And so do the Ravens. The Ravens, I mean, Lamar Jackson gave away that game to the Steelers. The Steelers had no business. Steelers had no business beating the Browns, but for Deshaun Watson. They had no business beating the Ravens last week, but for Lamar Jackson throwing a pick in the end zone late. Now, I had money on the Steelers, so I was happy with that pick. But, if they just take care of the ball, they win that game kind of easily. Steelers, I think, had 2 offensive drives worth anything the entire game. and the Ravens decided to go man on man against George Pickens late. It's the one thing not to do, and that's what allowed Kenny Pickett to make a big play. But I mean, the Ravens offense has been pretty solid this year, despite some injuries. Defense solid. And I expect with Hopkins there, the Titans offense to click a little bit better, to get, see if they can get Henry going a little bit more. I think they bounce back off of last week. I think it'll be a tight, close game in London.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear that was an audible at the line, because there's no way that Matt Canada would actually call a good play. I think that's basically the consensus for almost everybody right now, at least over there in Pittsburgh. They are tired of Matt Canada. That is no doubt about that. Now, a game we talked a little bit about earlier, Cleveland Browns, likely to be without Deshaun Watson. They're hosting in my opinion, the best team in the NFL, who's playing like the best team in the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers.
49ers favored, but as soon as the news of Watson being out came out, or possibly being out came out, San Francisco jumped from a 3-point favorite to a 7-point full touchdown favorite on the road there in Cleveland. Low total of 37. They're expecting, something like 23 to 16, 22 to 15, something like that. So they're not expecting Cleveland to do much offensively, but there is a lot of respect still in the market for the talent and the performance to date of the Cleveland Browns defense, which by many statistical metrics so far this year has actually been better than the San Francisco 49ers. I think the Browns are live dogs at home. I think they are. I think if they can, generally speaking, when a backup quarterback starts anew, as long as he's not named DTR, they actually usually overachieve expectations that first week. And I'll be curious, how well does San Francisco Brock Purdy do on the road against a great defense? Because we haven't seen that very often. He got hurt early against the Eagles last year. Most of the defenses he feasted on last year weren't very good. He didn't have a great game against the Cowboys when they beat him. Dak Prescott just had a bad game, and Dak kind of repeated that with the Cowboys getting whooped last week. But if anybody can trip him up, 90% of the tickets are on the 49ers. I just think that's a little high to be a touchdown favorite against a really, really uniquely talented defense that Cleveland is at Cleveland.
Yeah, I think Brock Purdy, we've said at this point, and I said myself, Brock Purdy seems like a guy who he does exactly what they ask him to do. But the more we watch Brock Purdy, not only does he do just what they ask him to do, he just makes good plays. Like he just does, whether he's escaping and, making plays with his legs or whatever. It just seems like he's always on the money. Brock Purdy he does not look like the last pick in the fucking draft. That's for sure. And they have yet to lose with this guy as quarterback. I certainly don't think that's going to happen. PJ Walker is a guy who's come in and played decently, at times. He had his time in Carolina, all that stuff. So we'll see. They picked him up because there's no way they were going to do another one with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They were not going to do that again. So we'll see if the Browns get things worked out, whether Deshaun Watson can go or not. Now we've got an interesting matchup. Two coaches right now who are under a lot of criticism. Both of them spent some time in New England. Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels to go head to head. Bill Belichick against his former student. You got Patriots at the Raiders.
Yeah, Raiders favored by 3, coming off that win against the Packers. The total sitting around 41 and a half. So they're expecting a low-scoring game, something like 22-19 effectively, somewhere in that neighborhood. Not a surprise given the Raiders' offensive. Whatever it is, Garoppolo can't go a single game without throwing a pick these days. So it's he had that sporadic problem in San Francisco, but it's become a permanent problem, it seems, with the Raiders. And at times they keep forgetting they have Devontae Adams, like they did through large parts of that Packer game. Now, despite some questionable calls by the coach, they still managed to win because Jordan Love kept throwing to the black and silver. So but we don't know who's going to really for sure be starting. It looks to me like Mac Jones is either on a short leash or is done in New England. So we'll see. I don't know. It's Brian Hoyer again, or who is it out there, or is it going to be that young kid who's flashed?
Bailey Zappi's come in a couple times the past few weeks.
Yeah, so maybe Zappy out there. The Raiders defense is good at safety, one good defensive end. The rest of their positions are kind of weak. The Raiders offense can't seem to run the ball at all this year, even with Josh Jacobs. And without being able to run the ball, Jimmy G will make at least one or two bad mistakes, and that's against Belichick. But you're right. Belichick really needs a bounce back. He's had the two worst defeats of his career in the last 2 weeks of the season. And is he going to let his former assistant beat him as well? That would really mean Belichick needs to start looking at exiting the coaching window sooner rather than later if he's really that far down and out. But you're right. If McDaniels is going to still be there next year in Vegas, he needs to win this game. This is at home. There's another opportunity to bounce back. It's against a team that can't seem to score through much of the season, and especially the last 2 weeks that the Saints ran over with their former Raiders quarterback in New England last week. So this is a sort of make or break game, I think, for both of these coaches in different respects. For Belichick to get New England back on track for this season and not have it be the worst season he's ever coached in New England or anywhere in the NFL, and for McDaniels to show that he's actually head coaching material and really just doesn't belong as an offensive coordinator for Belichick.
It seems like obviously Belichick has, won so many Super Bowls. It seems like he'll have an unlimited leash there, for as long as he wants to lose, they'll let him lose. Josh McDaniels is the opposite. Josh McDaniels, they're 1-3 and his star players, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, already speaking about, we're tired of losing, blah, blah, blah. Obviously they won, a close game last week. So now they're 2-3. We'll see if they can even things up. Ironically, Brian Hoyer, not the backup in New England, but he is the backup with the Raiders. Which he didn't get to start the other day when Jimmy G couldn't go. They brought in Aiden O'Connell, my guy from Purdue, who looked decent in that start when Jimmy G couldn't go. But yeah, interesting connection there. And then our final game, which I think is the Monday night game, is going to be the line for this was interesting to me. We got the Dallas Cowboys prime time at the LA Chargers. Now, notoriously, the Chargers don't have much of a home field advantage. But when I was looking at the line, it looked like the Cowboys are favored by about a field goal.
Yeah, they are. 2.5, total sitting around 51. So they're expecting, a higher scoring game, something like 27-24 for Dallas. Now, it's interesting confidence in the Cowboys. Now, part of it is the Chargers have a habit of having no home field when a big brand comes in. So maybe they're thinking this is like a neutral site game with so many Cowboys fans that might be there in L.A., because the Chargers especially just don't have the best home field historically there in LA, the ex-San Diego Chargers. But I mean, how do you bet on the Cowboys with the offensive problems they are having? They lose to the Cardinals. Their win over New England doesn't look all that impressive when New Orleans, took them apart when the Saints hadn't been good all year offensively. And now you're trusting them to go in and beat LA. That has been mostly pretty good this year, a little bit underachieving given their talent capabilities. So I was surprised at this line. I would lean Chargers in this one.
Yeah, the only thing is when you do look at the Chargers, this is a team that is probably play over the last, 8-10 games of regular season football. The Chargers have played incredibly well. Yet they continue to find ways to lose. So maybe they're thinking that the team that has a tough time finding ways to win against decent teams like Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, maybe they're going to finally get that done against a team that loves to find ways to lose like the LA Chargers. But yeah, I was shocked by that line a little bit considering the performance we saw from Dallas. I don't think really anybody has any idea what this team really is. So maybe we get that determination Monday Night Football against the Chargers. We did have some big injuries. Just, talking about injuries and how they're going to affect this season. A couple big injuries. Obviously, Cooper Kupp comes off the IR and is able to play, last week, got a lot of targets. But now we got another best receiver in the league, Justin Jefferson, going on the IR after straining a hamstring, pulling a hamstring, in last week's game. That obviously is going to have a big impact on the Minnesota Vikings and a big impact on fantasy going forward.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's I had Nick Chubb in my fantasy team early in the year, so I understand the injury woes taking a real whack at a lot of folks' fantasy league accumulations and its impact. Billy Walters, book The Gambler behind me, he had a detailed factor in for every single player on the field. So anywhere from 0.1 to 4 points 4 points being a quarterback usually. But from anywhere on that scope, you can see the impact of injuries on the line, see impact of injuries on the game, impact of injuries on schematic matchups, which coaches adjust better to those injuries. But yeah, seeing some big names get hurt early in the year this year.
And a guy who's quickly become a big name, I don't know how to fucking pronounce it because he keeps changing it, Devon Achane, who at one point told everyone his name was Devon. At one point, he told people his name was Devon Achane. And then he had his 200-yard performance and he changed his name. So anyway, but he also with the knee injury, goes on IR. So he's going to be gone. Obviously, Miami's got Mostert, who they probably have the 5 fastest guys in the fucking league somehow.
I think the Super Bowl everybody wants right now is Dolphins 49ers. That would be the fun. And it's one protege against the former protege. So both of them are proteges off the Shanahan tree. One of them is a Shanahan. The other one came from both Shanahans. And you're right. I mean, you have some of the most fun talent for Miami, some of the best schematics with San Francisco. I mean, right now, that would be, I think, people's ideal Super Bowl, even more so than Kansas City making it back all over again.
Oh, I definitely think people are ready for a new matchup. And obviously, the 49ers and Shanahan, he's had some bad luck with injuries. I think eventually he's going to get there, and that may be the year. I think if Brock Purdy doesn't get injured last year, we may have ended up seeing them there. Obviously the Eagles still undefeated. Eagles, really quality team. They're looking to get right back there as well. They certainly don't seem like they've got a hangover from losing the Super Bowl at all. But yes, autistic Mike McDaniel and that Dolphins team would be very interesting to see matched up against Kyle Shanahan. I do think that to me, talent level on both sides of the ball, when you look at that defense for the 49ers, you got to give them the edge if you're just looking at rosters. But obviously, it's funny, the Kyle Shanahan offense, with all those skill position players they've got there, seems way more traditional at this point, even with guys that can play any position with CMC and Debo and Kittle and all that stuff, than this wild new offense that Mike McDaniel has going, which somehow, despite Tyreek Hill always being the most dangerous person on the field, he manages to scheme his way into getting him wide open. I don't know how he does it.
It's the other impact that a lot of this sort of revolution, combining the Rams and the 49ers impact on the rest of the league is it seems like teams are more dependent. For about a decade or so, the broad statement was you had to pass. Passing is what led to points in the NFL. And that you had teams that had terrible run games. New England often had terrible run games with Brady. Didn't matter at all. Now you're seeing teams that if they can't run the ball, they can't score. And teams that are struggling to run the ball is part of the big story early in the season, why the median score, if you're not named Miami, is 20 points a game, which is 10 to 15% off the league. It's actually 15% off the league average over the past 10 years. So it'll be interesting to see how much has that changed going back to older school style, run-oriented, driven offenses. Is it as coaches and defensive schemes adjust, how much is our offense is going to have to change again in the way that Miami has done? Now, Miami can do what they're doing because of the personnel that they have. We see even with Mahomes in Kansas City, when he doesn't have Kelce out there, when he no longer has Tyreek Hill, not quite as consistently explosive as they once were. And Tua definitely wasn't much of anything before those guys showed up in the NFL. So so it's not clear everybody can easily replicate it. But we've seen the Rams struggle at times when they don't have the same personnel that when they had a dominant. But there again, when they could run the ball against you, no problems. When they couldn't, they've struggled. Even with Stafford putting up some big numbers from time to time, no longer the consistency like they struggled last week against the Eagles. And so it'll be interesting to see how much that change in the NFL continues to impact the rest of the year and how coaches adjust to those schemes.
Yeah, it certainly just depends on the type of team you have. When you're the Detroit Lions with that, that front offensive line they have that just seems to dominate. What Jared Goff does is very heavily reliant on getting that run game going, drawing that help up there in the play action. They basically have taken what the Tennessee Titans have been doing for the past several years, that thing has been completely reliant on Ryan Tannehill getting man-to-man matchups and hopefully a guy beats him, getting 8 in the box to deal with Derrick Henry. That's the only way Ryan Tannehill looks like an effective quarterback, it seems. But the Lions have been doing that with way better success because they got a much better offensive line, regardless of what running back you put back there. Whether it's David Montgomery, whether it's Gibbs, or whether before that it's DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams.
Well, you can look at the Colts. They finally decide to write that big check to running backs that the analytics people say don't write. They write, and what happens? They go out and beat the Tennessee Titans.
They go out and beat the Titans with their backup quarterback and with Ryan Moss. Is that the backup or third string running back?
Yep.
Who went for like 150 fucking yards while Jonathan Taylor looked like he hadn't played all offseason?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you're not. That's why you shouldn't fucking pay running backs.
Or you look at Green Bay. If they don't have Jones in the lineup, they can't reliably run the ball. Love makes big mistakes. It's this attempt to shift schemes is not as easily working with consistently across the league. San Francisco has found a way they can just replace a running back, no problem. They can keep replacing quarterbacks somehow, no problem.
Yeah.
That's that genius of what Mike Shanahan's given credit for goes all the way back to Gary Kubiak. He was the guy to really create the scheme. When he was the head coach at Houston, you could always bet on him to cover one of the two halves. He was like Belichick. If he didn't cover one half, he'd cover the other. He made the other car look good. Remember, he made some horrible. He made Osweiler look good. He made some horrible quarterbacks look good.
Brock Osweiler looked better than Peyton Manning the year they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And that had to be Kubiak because, man, I forget who was it, paid him a bunch of money the next year, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's always sucked."
Texans,
yeah, it was Houston.
Speaking of
Kubiak,
like,
oh no, he did always suck. That was just Kubiak's little bit of dust and magic.
$51 from Jay Schwalbach, who I don't know if you saw Schwalbach, but we did read your Rumble. I don't know what's going on with Rumble. I don't know why it went down. I've tried to restart it a million times. The link's just dead for some reason, so I'm not sure what's going on. But says, yeah, Rumble down, no money chat on locals. I think Jeremy's attacking your channel. He's trying. He's doing his best. Thank you, Jay Schwalbach. Blue-Eyed Scorpio for $5. Mike Shanahan should be in the Hall of Fame. He has the resume, and the coaching tree has been holding it down for the better part of a decade.
And isn't Shanahan also off the Bill Walsh tree? So it's another credit to Bill Walsh. Mm-hmm. I thought he goes way back to Walsh somehow, if I recall right.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, Shanahan had the tenure with Denver, obviously, and then he had a stint with Washington for a while, which wasn't, the most impressive, but had a lot of good running backs at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan's been brilliant, and they've but all of them are derivatives of, as far as I understand, is Gary Kubiak's offensive schemes. And wherever Kubiak went, their offense has overachieved.
If Kyle Shanahan's a little more aggressive in one half of football, it may even look more different for him too.
That's exactly
obviously 28-3 is always going to haunt him.
Twice. Yeah. Remember twice. Yeah. He's done that twice. So yeah, let's fix that part, Kyle, and you'll finally get that Super Bowl.
David Cushmore for $5. Do you guys think the Vikings can get back on track with this season? Can the Vikings be a 500 team again?
Justin Jefferson being on the IL doesn't help.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to come back till week 11. They're sitting at 1-4 right now, and they shouldn't be 1-4. This team's played better than that. Kirk Cousins has played better than that. They've had a lot of miscues and a lot of fumbles. I think they've already lost more fumbles this year than they may have all last year. And to be fair, we often see this sometimes. We have teams that everything broke right for the Vikings. They had all these come from behind victories, all these one-score games that they won last year where their record was really better than they probably were. Well, all of a sudden, you're kind of getting the reversal of fortune this year where those breaks just aren't going their way. I remember that a couple years ago with Derek Carr. Derek Carr came in the league. They won a lot of games initially, but when you looked at one-score games, everything was really tight. And then kind of the next year you had the opposite. So things are coming back, evening out with the football gods. I don't know if the Vikings can get back to 500. I think they are a good team, but without Justin Jefferson, a lot of things change. The way defenses plan for them changes, especially if TJ Hawkinson, who's talented as hell, continues to get hit in the hands and not catch the ball.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see it. But hey, you want to get off the schneid, it's a good thing going against the Chicago Bears. So we'll see.
That's true. And the Packers.
Yes. I saw like a really funny statement somebody put out on Twitter like a couple weeks into the season. They said, when it comes to the NFC North, the Lions are the new Packers, the Packers are the new Vikings, the Bears are the new Lions, but the Vikings are still the Vikings, or something like that. It was pretty funny. It's pretty funny. But anyway, that's going to do it for us this week. Again, so I hope the Rumble stuff gets figured out. Don't know why that went down. But as always, Robert, where can people go if they're looking for, we do the 5, kind of interesting games that we think, NFL and college football, if they want all the picks from not just football, but virtually every sport that's out there, where do they go?
If you want the odds in your favor, sportspicks.locals.com. We have had success, had huge success last week, had success picking in every single sport over the years, had big success on big games, on big picks in every major sporting final event last year, basketball, football, you name it. We have picks up on the Euro qualifiers. We have picks up on college football, the NFL. People put out free picks on everything from baseball to rugby, Australian rugby, and other kinds. As they've explained, there's a difference between the two. And so tennis, golf, cricket, and others put up free picks. All the Game On puts up free picks. So you get lots of free picks. You get master classes. You get live special Q&As direct with me every Friday night. Plus, you get picks that help put money in your pocket. So if you want the best handicapping advice at the best price anywhere, there's no better place than sportspicks.locals.com.
There you go. Make sure to check it out. Link is in the description. And even though this is a football show, we should state that the Astros have just closed it out and won their series, and they're headed to the American League Championship once again. So for Houston fans out there, or for baseball fans, there's your update. I see them drinking a lot of Budweiser and spraying champagne and beer all over right now. So no trash cans were harmed in this Astros season, apparently. But I guess
probably Houston, Texas will be an in-state rivalry, right?
I see all Texas ALCS right now.
Wow.
So that'll be interesting. I definitely think the Phillies are going to. I think all the momentum's with the Phillies. I think they're going to close it out next game. So we'll see.
Wow.
To me, that team, it looks to. I feel like it's going to be Phillies Astros. That's how I feel again. So we'll see if that happens. Right now, that's just the vibe I get. But thank you guys for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you next week, same time, same place. Have a good night. Bye.